This was my father's 1950s veterinarian boarding Twilight Zone adventure tale. I named it Party Away from Home. It's written by Mr. R. Condi and illustrated by myself in 2017. Can you find the Twilight Zone moment? This is dedicated to pets. Penny was a full privileges member of the family. She loved the car and possibly enjoyed a drive as much or more than any of us. But being a dog, complications arose with the American immigration whenever we had the occasion to travel to the U.S. She considered it desertion if she was left behind. So, when she, bags, and family were not all packed in the car together, she suspected the worst. My dad said my wife, and my daughter were planning to spend a week in the Pittsburgh, U.S. area, starting on Friday of an upcoming holiday weekend. He called the vet to arrange the boarding for the dog while we were away. Like the inn story, he said, the holiday must have had something to do with the fact that there was no room. The regular vet, arranged for the boarding of Penny at another kennel and assured my father that she would be taken good care of. My dad, because of the distance, asked his oldest son, if he would take the dog to the veterinarian. And the fact that he did not take the dog himself was to have some amusing consequences. He said the weather during the week was particularly hot, and our thoughts kept turning to Penny, poor dog, cooked up in a strange place. Yep. He was anxious to get back to get his dog. And that next Friday, he drove to the veterinarian's where the dog was and found the place and entered just as the receptionist was leaving. She asked him to wait for a few minutes, and while he was waiting, he had time to observe the other occupants in the room, which were a lady with an elderly dog talking about the ailments of the elderly cat, talking about the ailments of the cat, and dog on the floor. And in comes another person with their pet on a leash, and this pet interacted with the cat, and there was a sudden explosion between the two of them. The cat spat defiantly, and the dog on the floor made room for the acrobatics the small dog was doing on the end of her lead. The ladies gave out squeals and horror. But anyhow, the veterinarian came in, and not the veterinarian at this time, the attendant came in to the room because of the commotion, and my dad took the opportunity to go over and get his dog to get his dog as quickly as possible. Oh, Mr. Condi. I don't think he would have said it like that, actually. Like, I'm Mr. Condi, and get my dog, basically, now. So, the assistant vanished into the back of the building, and in a few minutes returned, as my dad called, the most woe-begone-looking dog imaginable on the end of a piece of rope. Mentally, he groaned, "Oh, Penny, what you? It crossed his mind that he was looking at the effects of tranquilizers being used to keep the dogs quiet. But in came another person with their pet, and this dog jumped up on the back of this person. And my daddy realized that this was not a female dog, but a male dog. So he turned quickly to the attendant, who was getting his bill ready, and said, "Is this a dog?" His look could not have been more blank had I said, "Is this a tiger?" Giving me rather a quizzical look, he said, "Sure, it's a dog." I noticed my mistake, and I rephrased my question. "Is this a male dog?" Well, my daddy basically said to look lively to the attendant. When my daddy said look lively, So the attendant probably thought he was some kind of nut, but the audience was all in attention, wondering what would happen next. The commotion apparently brought in the veterinarian, and asked the attendant to take Mr. Condi to the back to see if he could find his dog. And as they walked along the corridor with turned cages on both sides, there was no barking. About the second row of cages, my dad said, "Penny?" And the front of one of those cages almost burst open. Well, there was a reunion. I don't know who was happier. He said, "Oh boy." So all he wanted to do was get out and get home with his dog. And after everything had quieted down, his hat off, his tie off, and they'd eaten supper, he began to ponder the Twilight Zone aspect of the recent affair. So he pulled out the receipt from his pocket and started to read the contents and whatever. But it was a Mr. J. Condi on Eglinton. The sex of the dog was male. It was a beagle. The name was Rusty. It was dropped off on Friday and to be picked up next Friday. He said his name is not a common one, but here by the greatest coincidences, two persons, both named Condi, both owning beagle dogs, had boarded their dogs on the same day and were to be called for exactly a week later. He wondered what would happen when the other person came to pick up their dog. Surely both the vet and the assistant must have had a growing compassion for the poor dog named Penny, male dog named Penny, unlucky enough to have the owner, who was to say at least strange, if they hadn't figured out all the mix-up. Can you find the Twilight Zone moment? Did you see anything else weird? This is my illustration of the owner holding onto the rope with Rusty, trying to get out of that place as fast as possible. But here's my point. What was simple and Twilight Zone was a Twilight Zone experience in the 1950s. 2017, there's a lot of Twilight Zones happening out there that we're not aware of, that we're not being told of, and that we need to understand. So I'd like to ask you to forgive me, because I personally should be yelling and screaming that Jesus Christ is Lord. We have some problems out there, that information that we need to all have, children need to have, so that they can make good decisions in their lives. And just asking for forgiveness in Jesus Christ's holy name for not speaking sooner.